I was hospitalized after falling down the stairs, and for the first time in 2 years, an internist examined me. He frowned, flipped through the test results, and asked, "Who told you you have amnesia?" I replied. "My husband. He's a neurologist." He was silent for a few seconds. Not a word. Then he looked straight at me, his voice low and deep. "We need to re-examine this immediately. What I see shouldn't be like this. Thank you so much for being here. I'd love to know, where are you joining me from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. It means the world to see where this story reaches. A friendly reminder. This narrative includes fictional elements for storytelling and learning purposes. Any similarities to specific names or places are unintentional. However, the message behind it absolutely valuable. Let's get started. I woke up that Monday morning not knowing it would be the last day I'd spend as the woman my husband wanted me to be, confused, helpless, and slowly disappearing. The September sunlight filtered through the curtains of our bedroom in the Whitmore estate, painting everything in that soft golden hue that used to make me feel safe. Used to. Now as I blinked against the light, I couldn't remember if I'd already gotten dressed, or if it was morning or afternoon, or what day it was. "It's Monday, darling." Sterling's voice came from the doorway, smooth and patient. He stood there in his tailored gray suit, looking every bit the distinguished neurologist. He was silver hair, perfectly combed, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "September 18th. You slept well." I couldn't remember that either. He crossed the room with practiced ease, holding a small tray with pills arranged in a neat row. "Vitamins," he always said. And my Alzheimer's medication. The routine was so familiar now that I didn't question it anymore. I used to ask what each pill was for, but Sterling would explain in medical terms I couldn't follow, and I'd feel stupid for asking. So I stopped. "Here we go," he said gently, handing me a glass of water. "Take these, sweetheart. They'll help with the confusion." I swallowed the pills obediently, the way I'd done every morning for how long had it been? Months, years' time had become elastic, stretching and compressing in ways I couldn't track anymore. "Good girl," Sterling murmured, kissing my forehead. The gesture should have felt loving. Instead, something in my chest tightened with a feeling I couldn't name. After he left for the clinic, I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to piece together fragments of memory. There was a time, wasn't there, when I'd been someone different, someone who didn't need help remembering what day it was. I closed my eyes and reached for that past like grasping at smoke. A flash came me younger, standing in front of a half-built house, blueprints in hand directing contractors. My voice confident, commanding. "Move the master bedroom window 3 feet east. I want to see Elliott Bay from the bed." The image felt real and distant at once, like watching someone else's life through frosted glass. Had that been me, Elaine Whitmore, the woman who'd built an empire from nothing, turning abandoned lots into architectural gems across Seattle? I tried to hold on to the memory, but it slipped away as quickly as it had come. "Mrs. Whitmore." A cheerful voice interrupted my thoughts. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, her nurse's scrubs crisp and white, her smile warm and practiced. "How are we feeling this morning?" Rebecca? Sterling had hired her 6 months ago, or was it longer, to help care for me. She was always here now, watching me with those bright, attentive eyes, making sure I ate, making sure I didn't wander, making sure I took my pills. "I'm fine," I said automatically, though I wasn't sure if that was true. "That's wonderful." She moved through the room with efficient familiarity, straightening pillows, checking the pill bottles on the nightstand. "Dr. Whitmore said you have a busy day today. He asked me to make sure you stay hydrated." A busy day, I couldn't imagine what that meant. My days had become a blur of sitting by windows trying to remember things that seemed to evaporate the moment I grasped them. I wandered downstairs later, drawn by muscle memory more than purpose. The house felt enormous and empty, every room a monument to a life I couldn't quite recall building. In the study, my eyes caught on a stack of papers on Sterling's desk. Something about them pulled me closer. Property transfer deed, the top page read. And there at the bottom, my signature, Elaine Whitmore, in handwriting that looked like mine but felt foreign. I stared at it, my heart beginning to race. When had I signed this? What was I transferring? The sound of Sterling's voice drifted from the hallway and I froze. He was on the phone, his tone low and controlled. I shouldn't have been listening, but something made me press closer to the door. "Just a few more months," he was saying. "The neurological damage will be permanent by then. No court will question her capacity. The foundation will be untouchable." The words washed over me like ice water. Foundation. What foundation? I heard his footsteps approaching and quickly moved away from the door, my hands trembling. By the time he entered the study, I was standing by the window, the transfer deed clutched in my shaking fingers. "Darling." His voice was gentle, concerned. "What are you doing in here?" I turned to face him, holding up the paper. "Sterling, what is this? I don't remember signing this." His expression shifted into something I'd seen countless times before, patient sympathy mixed with just a hint of sadness. He crossed to me and took the paper from my hands, his touch soft but firm. "Oh, sweetheart," he said, guiding me to a chair. "We signed this last week, remember? You wanted to make sure the properties were protected. We talked about it over breakfast. Had we..." I searched my memory desperately but found nothing. Just fog and fragments. "I don't remember," I whispered. Sterling knelt beside my chair, taking my hands in his. "I know you don't. And that's okay. That's what the Alzheimer's does, darling. It takes our memories. But I'm here to help you. I'm here to take care of everything." His words should have been comforting. But as I looked into his eyes, those kind, trustworthy eyes, something deep in my gut twisted with a feeling that didn't match his gentle tone. "Are you sure?" I asked quietly. "Are you sure I have Alzheimer's?" For just a moment, so brief I might have imagined it, something flickered across his face. Surprise, annoyance. But then it was gone, replaced by that familiar, patient smile. "Darling, we've been over this. I'm a neurologist. I know the signs. And I would never lie to you about something this important." He stood smoothing his suit. "Now why don't you rest? Rebecca will bring you lunch." He left me there, and I sat in the chair long after his footsteps faded, staring at nothing. The fog in my mind felt thicker than ever, but beneath it, something new was stirring. A question. Small and persistent. That night, I lay in bed beside Sterling, listening to his steady breathing in the darkness. The pills he'd given me should have made me drowsy, but my mind refused to quiet. I kept thinking about that paper, about his phone call, about the way he'd looked at me when I asked if I really had Alzheimer's. And then piercing through the fog like a blade of light, a terrifying thought formed. What if I wasn't losing my mind at all? What if someone was taking it from me? The thought was so shocking, so impossible, that my heart began to pound. I turned my head slightly, looking at Sterling's profile in the dim light from the window. My husband of 40 years, the man I'd trusted with everything. Would he? I lay there in the darkness, afraid to move, afraid to breathe as that question echoed through my mind like thunder. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long, the sharp, clear edge of fear. A few days later, during one of those rare moments when my mind cleared like morning fog lifting off Elliott Bay, I made a decision that would save my life. It was Wednesday. I knew it was Wednesday because Sterling had left early for a conference downtown and Rebecca had called in sick, or so he told me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was alone in the house. Truly alone. And in that silence, I noticed something. My head didn't ache. The fog that usually pressed against my thoughts like heavy wool had thinned to a gauze I could almost see through. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the pill bottles lined up on the counter, the vitamins, the Alzheimer's medication, and a pattern emerged that I'd been too confused to see before. I was always worse after taking the morning pills. Always. The fog rolled in within an hour, thick and suffocating, stealing words and memories and scents. But now standing here at 10 in the morning, without them, I could think. My hands shook as I picked up one of the vitamin bottles, turning it in the light. It looked innocent, harmless. But my gut, that deep instinct that no amount of confusion could fully erase, screamed that something was terribly wrong. I needed help, but who could I trust? Not Rebecca, who watched me like a hawk. Not Sterling's colleagues at the clinic. Not our old friends, most of whom had drifted away over the years as I became too difficult to include. Then I thought of Margaret. Margaret Hayes had lived next door for 15 years. We'd shared coffee on her porch countless mornings, complained about property taxes, traded recipes neither of us actually made. She was 70-something, sharp as a tack, and possessed a no-nonsense practicality that I'd always admired. More importantly, she'd been watching me with concerned eyes for months now, asking gentle questions. "Are you sure you're okay, honey? You seem so tired lately." Before I could talk myself out of it, I slipped out the back door and crossed the narrow strip of lawn between our houses. Margaret answered on the second knock, surprise flickering across her weathered face. "Elaine, is everything all right?" "No," I said, and my voice cracked. "No, it's not. Can I come in?" She pulled me inside without hesitation, settling me at her kitchen table with a cup of tea I didn't remember her making. The kitchen was warm and cluttered in a lived-in way my sterile house hadn't been in years. Cookbooks stacked haphazardly, a half-finished crossword on the counter. A cat curled in a sunny spot by the window. "Talk to me," Margaret said, sitting across from me with her hands wrapped around her own mug. The words came out in a tumble. "I think Sterling is doing something to me. I can't prove it. I don't have evidence. But Margaret, I'm only confused when he's home, when I take the pills he gives me. Today, for the first time in months, I woke up alone and I feel like me." I waited for her to tell me I was imagining things, that my brilliant neurologist husband would never hurt me, that the Alzheimer's was making me paranoid. Instead, Margaret set down her tea with a decisive clink. "I've thought something was off for a while now. You used to be the sharpest woman I knew, Elaine. Built half this neighborhood from the ground up. Then suddenly you couldn't remember what day it was." She shook her head. "It never sat right with me." Relief flooded through me so intensely I nearly wept. "You believe me." "I believe you. And I believe we need proof." She stood pulling out her phone with surprising tech savvy for a woman her age. "My grandson works in security. He's always going on about these tiny cameras. If Sterling's doing what you think he's doing, we need to catch him in the act." Cameras. I repeated the word, feeling both dangerous and necessary. Hidden ones. Small enough to fit in everyday objects. Her fingers flew across her phone screen. "Let's see. Bedroom would be the logical place if he's doing something with your medication, right?" I nodded, my heart hammering. Within 2 hours, Margaret had ordered what she called a basic surveillance kit with overnight shipping. She showed me the items on her computer: a clock with a camera hidden in the face, a phone charger with a lens in the USB port, even a teddy bear, an old stuffed thing she pulled from her own closet that could house a third camera. "We'll set them up tomorrow," she said firmly. "Thursday. You said Sterling has clinic hours all day." "Yes, and Rebecca, she usually comes at 9, but maybe I could tell her I need rest." "Tell her you want privacy. Doctor's orders to reduce stimulation." Margaret's smile was grim. Play the confused patient. "It's what he expects, isn't it?" That night, I lay in bed next to Sterling, my mind clearer than it had been in months. He'd come home with takeout and concern, asking why I hadn't taken my evening medications. I forgot. I'd lied, and he'd frowned but didn't push. He didn't insist. Perhaps he sensed I was testing him, or perhaps he believed the morning dose had already done its work. Instead, he'd watched me carefully all evening, and I'd made sure to seem vague and tired, dropping my fork at dinner, asking what day it was. The performance exhausted me, but it worked. He relaxed, kissed my forehead, told me to get some rest. As I drifted toward sleep, a memory surfaced sharp and clear and heartbreaking. A little girl with dark curls and serious brown eyes sitting in my office while I reviewed contracts. "Mama, when can we tell Daddy about me?" she'd asked. Maya. Oh God, Maya. My daughter. Not by birth, but by choice. I'd adopted her 30 years ago after her parents died in a fire, but Sterling had refused to accept her, had threatened divorce if I brought someone else's child into our home. So I'd made arrangements, a good family, to raise her regular visits I'd disguised as charity work, financial support, funneled through trusts Sterling never knew about. We'd talked every Sunday. Every single Sunday for 30 years. When was the last time she'd called? I tried to remember and couldn't. Weeks, months. The fog had been so thick for so long. Surely she'd tried to reach me. Surely she was worried. Unless Sterling had been intercepting those calls too, blocking her, telling her I was unavailable. Or worse, what if Rebecca had been answering, pretending to be me? The thought made me feel sick. I had to survive this. Had to stay clear-headed long enough to get proof, to get help to reach Maya. She was a forensic psychologist at the FBI in Baltimore, smart, capable, trained to see through lies. If I could just get word to her, she would know what to do. But first, the cameras. First, the evidence. I turned my head slightly, looking at Sterling's profile in the darkness. My husband of 40 years. The man I'd built a life with, trusted absolutely. The man who might be slowly killing me. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow, we start fighting back. The morning Sterling left for his conference in Portland, Rebecca gave me a higher dose than usual. Doctor's orders, she said with a smile I'd once thought was kind. The cameras Margaret and I had hidden a week ago, tucked inside the bedroom clock. The phone charger, the old teddy bear on the shelf were recording everything. I took small comfort in that as I swallowed the pills, even as my hands started shaking within minutes. Sterling had called from the airport, his voice crisp through Rebecca's phone speaker. Make sure she takes the full dose today. I'll be back tomorrow night. Of course, Dr. Whitmore, Rebecca had replied, watching me with those bright, attentive eyes. Now, 20 minutes later, the room tilted sideways. I'd been trying to make it to the bathroom, gripping the hallway wall for support, when the floor seemed to drop away beneath my feet. My legs buckled. The stairs, I'd forgotten about the stairs. The world spun. My foot missed the first step entirely. Then I was falling. The impact came in stages, shoulder, hip, head against the wooden railing. Pain exploded through my skull. I heard Rebecca scream, heard my own body tumbling down, down, down until everything went black. Voices filtered through the darkness. Rebecca's high and panicked. Dr. Whitmore! Dr. Whitmore! She fell. There's blood. Oh, God, there's so much blood. Then another voice, familiar and steady. Margaret. Move aside, I'm calling 911. No. Rebecca's protest was sharp. We should call Dr. Whitmore's clinic. He'll know what to do. She needs an ambulance. Now. Margaret's tone left no room for argument. I tried to open my eyes, but my head felt like it was splitting apart. Something warm and wet trickled down my face. Blood, I realized distantly. My blood. I'm going through her purse, Margaret was saying. There has to be weight. Here. Through the fog of pain, I heard paper rustling. Maya, Margaret read aloud. FBI Baltimore, 410. Her voice sharpened. Rebecca, who's Maya? I don't know what you're... This note says emergency in capital letters, in Mrs. Whitmore's handwriting. A pause. I'm calling this number. I'd written that note 3 days ago during a clear moment, tucked it into my wallet where I'd remember it, or where someone would find it if something happened to me. Thank God for Margaret. The 911 operator's voice came through Margaret's phone, and I heard my neighbor, my friend, explain the situation with calm precision. 71-year-old female head trauma from a fall unconscious, significant bleeding. Then her voice changed, became gentle. Yes, hello, is this Maya? My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm your mother's neighbor. No, honey, listen. Your mother fell. She's unconscious. The ambulance is coming, but I need you to know... She paused. Rebecca said something about you being in Europe. Even through my daze, I heard the shock in the response crackling through the phone. Europe. I've been trying to reach her for months. He told me she was traveling, that she needed space. The voice was young, female, desperate. Maya. My Maya. Who told you that? Her husband, Dr. Whitmore, he said, I don't think he's been telling you the truth. Margaret's voice hardened. We're going to Harborview Medical Center. Can you get here? The conversation faded as darkness pulled at me again, but I held on to that voice. Maya knew. Maya was coming. The ambulance arrived with sirens and urgent voices. Paramedics swarmed around me, checking vitals, stabilizing my neck. I felt myself being lifted, strapped down. Ma'am, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can hear me. I managed a weak squeeze. Good. You're going to be okay. We're taking you to Harborview. Margaret's face appeared above me, lined with worry. She took my free hand, leaned close. Elaine, honey, can you hear me? I forced my eyes open a crack, tried to focus on her face. Don't. My voice came out as barely a whisper. Don't. Let him take me. Understanding flashed in her eyes. I won't, I promise. The cameras are still recording. We have proof. Rebecca was crying somewhere in the background, her voice thin and scared. This wasn't supposed to happen. He said it was just to help her rest. He said, but I didn't hear the rest. The darkness pulled me under again. When consciousness returned, everything was white and beeping. White ceiling tiles. White walls. The steady beep, beep, beep of monitors. An IV in my arm. Fluorescent lights that hurt my eyes. A man's face appeared above me, younger than Sterling, maybe 35, with sandy brown hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Whitmore. His voice was gentle, professional. I'm Dr. Ryan Matthews. You're at Harborview Medical Center. You've had a fall and you hit your head pretty hard, but you're stable now. Can you tell me your name? Elaine, I managed my mouth dry. Elaine Whitmore. Good. That's very good. He smiled, and something about his expression reminded me that not all doctors were like Sterling. Mrs. Whitmore, I need to ask you some questions. It's important. Can you tell me what medications you're currently taking? The question should have been simple. I'd answered it dozens of times over the years at dentist appointments, at pharmacies, filling out forms. But as I lay there, my head throbbing, my mind clearer than it had been in months, despite the pain, I realized something that made my blood run cold. I don't know, I whispered. Dr. Matthews' expression sharpened slightly. You don't know my husband. He's a neurologist. He manages my medications. He told me they were for Alzheimer's. But the words caught in my throat. I don't actually know what I've been taking. His eyes met mine, and I saw understanding dawn there along with something else. Concern. Suspicion. Mrs. Whitmore, he said carefully, I'm going to run some tests. Routine blood work, toxicology screening. Is that all right? Toxicology. The word hung in the air between us. Yes, I said. Yes, please. He nodded, made a note on his tablet, then looked back at me. Your neighbor, Mrs. Hayes, she's in the waiting room. She asked me to tell you that she called someone named Maya. Does that name mean something to you? Tears pricked my eyes. My daughter. She's flying in from Baltimore. She'll be here as soon as she can. He paused. Mrs. Whitmore, is there anyone else you'd like me to call? Your husband, perhaps? The fear must have shown on my face because he added quickly, you don't have to see anyone you don't want to see. You're safe here. Safe. When was the last time I'd felt safe? Not yet, I said. Please, not yet. Dr. Matthews nodded slowly. All right. We'll wait. But Mrs. Whitmore, whatever's going on, we're going to figure it out. As he left to order the tests, I closed my eyes and thought about the cameras still recording in my bedroom, about Maya flying across the country, about Margaret standing guard in the waiting room. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't alone. And for the first time in months, I let myself hope. The hours that followed were a blur of tests, questions, and a creeping realization that something was very, very wrong. Doctor. Ryan Matthews returned to my room in the late afternoon, a tablet in his hand and a frown etched deep into his face. He pulled up a chair beside my bed, and Margaret straightened in her seat by the window, suddenly alert. Mrs. Whitmore. He began, his voice measured and careful. I've been reviewing your case, and I need to ask you a few more questions. I nodded, though my head still throbbed from the fall. The pain was duller now, but persistent, a constant reminder of how close I'd come to losing everything. You said your husband diagnosed you with Alzheimer's disease. When was that? About 2 years ago, I said quietly. Maybe a little more. He said the tests confirmed it. And he's been treating you since then. Yes, He gives me medication every day, pills for my memory. Dr. Matthews tapped something on his tablet, then looked up at me. His expression was unreadable, but I could see the wheels turning in his mind. "Well, what kind of doctor is your husband?" "He's a neurologist," I said. "One of the best in Seattle. He has his own clinic on Madison Street. He's been practicing for over 30 years. "Doctor." Matthews went very still. His frown deepened and he set the tablet down on his lap. "Mrs. Whitmore, I need you to understand something. Your symptoms don't fit the pattern of classic Alzheimer's disease." I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, his tone careful but firm. "Alzheimer's progresses in a predictable way. Memory loss is gradual and consistent. But your memory loss is erratic. Some days you're lucid, other days you're not. You have tremors in your hands, difficulty with balance, episodes of disorientation that come and go." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Those aren't Alzheimer's symptoms. They're signs of something else." My chest tightened. What are you saying?" He met my eyes, and I saw something in his expression that made my blood run cold. Concern, suspicion, and something else, certainty. "I'm saying that what I'm seeing shouldn't exist, not if you really have Alzheimer's. The pattern is all wrong. I think we need to run some tests. Immediately." Margaret stood up from her chair, her voice sharp. "What kind of tests?" "A full toxicology panel," he said. "I want to check for heavy metals, chemical exposure, anything that might be affecting her nervous system." The word toxicology echoed in my mind, cold and sharp. "You think she's been poisoned?" Margaret's voice was low, dangerous. Dr. Matthews didn't flinch. "I think we need to rule it out." He looked at me again, his expression serious. "Mrs. Whitmore, I need your permission to draw blood and run these tests. It might take until tomorrow morning to get the results, but I need to know what's really going on." I stared at him, my mind spinning. Poisoned. How could that be? But then I thought of the pills Sterling gave me every morning, the way I felt worse after taking them, the way my mind cleared when he was away, the way I had woken up this morning alone in the house and felt like myself for the first time in months. "Do it," I whispered. They took my blood that evening. The nurse was gentle, her hand steady as she tied the tourniquet around my arm and slid the needle into my vein. I watched the dark red liquid fill one vial, then another, then another. "We'll have answers soon," Dr. Matthews said as he labeled the vials carefully. "Try to rest tonight." But I couldn't rest. I lay in the narrow hospital bed staring at the ceiling while Margaret sat beside me in the dim light. The room was quiet except for the beeping of monitors and the distant sound of footsteps in the hallway. "Margaret," I said softly, "did you really call Maya?" She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I did, honey. I called her right after the ambulance left. She's flying in tomorrow afternoon." My throat tightened. "She's coming." "Of course she's coming. She loves you, Elaine. She's been trying to reach you for months." I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks. I thought she'd forgotten about me. "Never," Margaret said fiercely. "Sterling's been lying to you. He's been keeping her away, but not anymore." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that Maya still cared, that I wasn't as alone as I felt. "Thank you," I whispered. Margaret stayed with me all night. She dozed in the chair beside my bed, her hand resting on mine. Every time I woke in the darkness, she was there. The next morning, Dr. Matthews came into my room just after sunrise. His face was grave. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said quietly, "I have your results." Margaret stood up, her hand gripping mine tightly. Dr. Matthews pulled up a chair and opened a folder. Inside were printouts covered in numbers and medical terms I didn't understand, but he pointed to 2 lines highlighted in yellow. "Mercury and lead," he said, "both at dangerously elevated levels." I stared at the paper, the words swimming in front of me. I don't understand." He looked at me, his expression steady but kind. "Mrs. Whitmore, you don't have Alzheimer's disease. You've been poisoned. You've been exposed to heavy metals, mercury, and lead over a long period of time. The levels in your blood are consistent with chronic, deliberate exposure." The room tilted. "Deliberate?" Margaret's voice cracked. "You're saying someone did this to her on purpose." "These levels don't occur naturally," Dr. Matthews said, "and they don't happen by accident. This kind of accumulation takes time. It takes repeated exposure." I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He hesitated, then said, "Based on the accumulation in your system, at least 2 years, possibly longer." 2 years. 2 years of pills. 2 years of Sterling's concerned face, his gentle voice, his hands on my shoulders as he told me I was forgetting things again. 2 years of poison. "This doesn't happen by accident, doctor," Matthews repeated quietly. "Someone has been exposing you to these substances intentionally." My phone buzzed on the bedside table. I looked down. The screen lit up with a name I knew too well, Sterling Whitmore. He must have landed in Portland by now. He must have heard about my accident. Dr. Matthews glanced at the phone, then at me. His voice was steady, firm. "You don't have to answer that." I stared at the screen. My husband, my poisoner. For 40 years, I had answered every call. Every time he needed me, I was there. I had been the dutiful wife, the supportive partner, the woman who trusted him with everything. Not anymore. I reached out with a trembling hand and pressed the red button. The call ended, and for the first time in 40 years, I felt free. Sterling arrived like a storm full of authority and measured concern, but this time I watched him with new eyes. I heard him before I saw him. His voice carried down the hallway outside my room, sharp and demanding, cutting through the quiet hum of the hospital. "I'm here to see my wife." "Where is she?" Margaret, who had been reading beside my bed, looked up. Our eyes met. She stood and quietly moved to the door, cracking it open just enough to see. "Doctor." Matthew's voice answered, calm but firm. "Dr. Whitmore, your wife is stable and resting. Visiting hours are—" "I'm not a visitor," Sterling interrupted. "I'm her husband and I'm a physician. I want to see her chart and I want to take her home." There was a pause. Then Dr. Matthews spoke again, and this time his tone had an edge to it. "Mrs. Whitmore is being held for medical observation due to an ongoing investigation into toxic exposure. She won't be discharged until we've completed our evaluation." Toxic exposure. Sterling's voice rose slightly, just enough for me to hear the anger beneath it. "That's absurd. My wife has Alzheimer's disease. I've been treating her for 2 years. And that," Dr. Matthews said quietly, "is exactly why you won't be treating her anymore." Silence. Margaret turned to me, her face pale. "He's here." I nodded, my heart pounding. "I know." A moment later, the door opened and Sterling walked in. He looked exactly as he always did, tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a dark suit. His face was lined with what anyone else would have read as worry. But I saw something different now. I saw the tightness around his mouth, the flicker of calculation in his eyes, the way his gaze swept the room, assessing, measuring. "Elaine," he said, his voice warm and gentle. He crossed the room in 3 strides and reached for my hand. I pulled it away. He froze, just for a second. Then he smiled as if I'd simply made a mistake. "Sweetheart, you scared me," he said, sitting down in the chair Margaret had vacated. She stood near the window now, arms crossed, watching him like a hawk. "Margaret called and said you'd fallen. Why didn't you call me?" "I was unconscious," I said quietly. "Of course," he murmured. "Of course. I came as soon as I could." He glanced at the monitors beside my bed, then at the IV in my arm. "Have they been taking good care of you?" "Yes." He smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good. I've spoken to Dr. Matthews. I'll make arrangements to bring you home tomorrow. You'll be more comfortable there and Rebecca can—" "I'm not going home," I said. Sterling blinked. "What? I'm staying here?" I said, my voice stronger now. "Until the doctors say I can leave." He leaned forward, his expression shifting to concern. Elaine, sweetheart, you're confused. You need rest and you need your medication. Did you take your pills today? There it was. The question I'd heard 1,000 times. The question that always came with a little pill cup and a glass of water and his patient, loving smile. But this time I understood what he was really asking. Are you still under my control? No, I said I didn't. His jaw tightened, just barely. Elaine, you need to take your medication. It's important for your memory. My memory is fine, I said. Sweetheart, I don't have Alzheimer's. I said the words coming out steady and clear. I have heavy metal poisoning. Mercury and lead. The doctors told me this morning. Sterling went very still. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he laughed a soft, indulgent sound. Elaine, that's not possible. Who told you that? Dr. Matthews, he ran a toxicology panel. Sterling's smile faded. A toxicology panel on whose authority? Mine, I said. He stared at me. Then he stood and walked to the table where my chart sat in a plastic folder. He picked it up and flipped it open. I watched his face as he read. I watched the color drain from his skin. I watched his hands tighten on the edges of the paper. He knew. He knew that I knew. This is... He cleared his throat, his voice strained. This is highly irregular. Mercury and lead. Those levels could be from environmental exposure, old paint, contaminated water. For 2 years, I asked. He looked at me sharply. That's what the doctor said. I continued, that I've been exposed for at least 2 years, chronically, deliberately. Deliberately. Sterling's voice turned cold. Elaine, what exactly are you accusing me of? I met his eyes. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just asking for a second opinion on everything. His expression hardened. You're confused. You're upset. This fall has clearly... I'm not confused, I said. Margaret stepped forward. She's clear as day, Sterling. Clearer than she's been in months. He turned on her, his voice sharp. This is a private family matter, Margaret. I'd appreciate it if you'd... I'm staying, Margaret said firmly. A nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. She glanced between us, sensing the tension. Is everything all right here? She asked. Fine, Sterling said quickly, his smile returning like a mask. I was just leaving. He turned back to me and his voice softened again. Elaine, I'll come back tomorrow. We'll sort all of this out. Get some rest, sweetheart. He leaned down, and for a moment I thought he was going to kiss my forehead. Instead, he leaned close to my ear and whispered, his breath warm against my skin. Rebecca is very worried about you, darling. Then he straightened, smiled at the nurse, and walked out of the room. The door closed behind him. Margaret rushed to my side. Are you okay? I nodded, but my hands were shaking. Rebecca. He'd said her name like a promise, like a reminder. She was still in my house, still watching, still loyal to him. And I realized, with cold, creeping clarity, that I didn't know how deep this conspiracy went. I didn't know who else was involved. I didn't know how long he'd been planning this. But I knew one thing. Sterling wasn't done. He had walked out of this room with his mask intact, his reputation still polished. To the nurse, to anyone watching, he'd looked like a concerned husband dealing with a confused elderly wife. But I had seen through the mask. I had seen the moment his face changed when he read the toxicology report. I had seen the calculation in his eyes, the way he was already planning his next move. He would come back. He would try again. He would fight to take me home, to put me back under his control, to silence me before I could tell anyone else what I knew. Margaret sat down beside me, her hand gripping mine. What do we do now? I looked at her. This woman who had refused to look away, who had installed cameras in my house, who had called 911 when I fell, who had stayed by my side every single moment since. We fight, I said quietly. We tell the truth, and we make sure he can never do this to anyone else. Margaret nodded. I'm with you, every step of the way. I looked toward the door where Sterling had disappeared. He thought he still had power over me. He thought I was still the confused, helpless woman he'd been slowly erasing for 2 years. But he was wrong. I was done being his victim. And tomorrow I would make sure the world knew exactly what he'd done. After Sterling left, I made a decision. If I was going to fight back, I needed to stop being afraid. Margaret sat beside me, her hand still gripping mine. The room felt too quiet, too small. I could still hear Sterling's voice in my head. "Rebecca is very worried about you, darling." A threat, a reminder. But I had something he didn't know about. Margaret. I said quietly, "We need to tell them." She looked at me, her eyes sharp. "Tell who?" "Dr. Matthews, the police, everyone." I took a breath. "We need to show them the cameras." An hour later, I sat across from Dr. Ryan Matthews in a small office down the hall from my room. Margaret stood by the door, arms crossed. A woman I didn't know sat beside Dr. Matthews, tall, black, mid-40s with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense expression. "Mrs. Whitmore," Dr. Matthews said gently, "this is Detective Sarah Mitchell. She's with the King County Sheriff's Office Elder Abuse Unit." Detective Mitchell leaned forward, her voice calm and professional. "Mrs. Whitmore, Dr. Matthews has briefed me on your situation. I understand you've been subjected to chronic poisoning. I need you to tell me everything you know." I nodded, my hands trembling in my lap. "There's something I need to tell you. Something important." "Go ahead," she said. I glanced at Margaret. She gave me a small nod. 3 months ago. I began. I asked my neighbor Margaret to help me. I was having moments of clarity times when I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't prove it. So Margaret, she installed hidden cameras in my house. Detective Mitchell's eyebrows rose slightly. "Hidden cameras?" "Yes," Margaret said from the doorway. 3 of them. A mini camera in a desk clock in the bedroom, one in a phone charger in the kitchen, and one in a stuffed bear in the living room. They've been recording continuously and uploading to a cloud account I set up. Elaine didn't want Sterling to know. Dr. Matthews sat forward. "You have 3 months of footage." "Yes," I said. "And if Sterling has been poisoning me, it's on those videos." Detective Mitchell pulled out her phone. "Mrs. Hayes, I need you to retrieve that footage immediately. Can you access it from here?" Margaret shook her head. "The login is on my laptop, at my house." "Then go get it," Detective Mitchell said firmly. "Now." Margaret left. The wait felt like an eternity. I sat in that small office staring at the clock on the wall, my heart pounding. Dr. Matthews brought me tea. Detective Mitchell made phone calls, her voice low and clipped as she spoke to someone about search warrants and evidence protocols. Finally, 40 minutes later, Margaret returned, breathless, a silver laptop tucked under her arm. "Rebecca wasn't home," she said as she set the computer on the desk. "I went in through the back gate." Detective Mitchell didn't even blink. "Good. Open it." Margaret logged in, her fingers flying across the keyboard. A moment later, a cloud storage page appeared on the screen, hundreds of video files organized by date and camera location. "Pick a recent one," Detective Mitchell said. Margaret clicked on a file labeled bedroom_cam_September 10th_0800. The video loaded, and my world cracked open. The camera angle was from the desk clock aimed at the bedroom doorway and part of the adjoining bathroom. The timestamp read 8:14 a.m. I watched Sterling walk into frame. He was dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt, his reading glasses perched on his nose. In his hands was a small metal tray, the kind used in medical offices for organizing instruments. On the tray were 2 pill bottles, a mortar and pestle, and a glass vial filled with white powder. My breath stopped. Sterling set the tray down on the bathroom counter, just out of view of where I would have been if I'd been standing at the mirror. He pulled on a pair of latex gloves. Then methodically, he opened one of the pill bottles and poured several white tablets into the mortar. He ground them into powder, his movements calm and practiced. He opened the vial and added a small amount of the white powder from inside. Then he funneled the mixture back into the pill bottle. My vitamin bottle, the one I took every morning. "Jesus Christ," Dr. Matthews whispered. Detective Mitchell's face was stone. "Keep watching." The video continued. A moment later, Rebecca appeared in the doorway. She glanced down the hall, then stepped into the bathroom. "Is it ready?" she asked. Sterling nodded. "This batch should last another 2 weeks." Rebecca crossed her arms, her voice low. "How much longer, Sterling? She's getting worse." "Just a few more months." Sterling said, his tone almost bored. "The neurological damage will become permanent. After that, no court will question the will." Rebecca hesitated. "And if someone finds out—" Sterling looked at her, his expression cold. "No one will find out. She doesn't remember anything. And even if she did, who would believe her?" He capped the pill bottle and handed it to Rebecca. "Put this back in the kitchen," he said, "and make sure she takes it with breakfast." Rebecca nodded and left. Sterling stood there for a moment, staring at himself in the mirror. Then he smiled. The video ended. The office was silent. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. That was my husband, the man I'd loved for 40 years, the man I'd trusted with my life, and he had been killing me. Detective Mitchell turned to me, her voice steady but grim. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is attempted murder. We're opening a criminal investigation immediately." I nodded, but I couldn't speak. "Doctor." Matthews reached over and squeezed my shoulder. "You're safe now, Elaine." But I didn't feel safe. I felt hollow. Detective Mitchell began copying the video files onto a secure drive, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. "Mrs. Hayes, I'll need access to all of these files. And Mrs. Whitmore, I need to ask, do you have any assets, property bank accounts, anything your husband might have tried to control?" Margaret and I exchanged a glance. I have real estate," I said slowly. "A lot of it. Properties I bought over 30 years in the business. They're worth millions." Detective Mitchell looked up sharply. "And does your husband have access to those assets?" I thought of the papers Sterling had shown me, the deeds I didn't remember signing. "I don't know," I whispered. Detective Mitchell's expression darkened. "We need to check your financial records. Cases like this, they're never just about control, they're about money." And in that moment, I understood. Sterling wasn't just poisoning me, he was erasing me. As the toxins left my body, my mind began to clear, and with clarity came horror. What else had Sterling done while I was lost in the fog? 3 days had passed since Detective Mitchell secured the video evidence. 3 days of chelation therapy, IV fluids, and round-the-clock monitoring. The tremors in my hands had lessened. The confusion that had plagued me for 2 years was lifting like morning mist. But with each moment of clarity, I remembered more. And what I remembered terrified me. Detective Mitchell came to my room on Friday afternoon, a thick folder under her arm and a grim expression on her face. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, pulling up a chair, "we need to talk about your finances." Margaret, who had barely left my side, straightened in her seat. "What did you find?" Detective Mitchell opened the folder and spread a series of documents across the rolling table in front of me. Deeds, bank statements, legal filings. "Your husband has been very busy," she said. I stared at the papers, my heart sinking. "Over the past 18 months, Detective Mitchell continued, 15 parcels of land registered in your name were transferred to an entity called the Whitmore Foundation." "The Whitmore Foundation," I echoed. She nodded. "On paper, it's a charitable trust. In reality, it's a shell. The foundation has no employees, no charitable activities, and no public records. The funds from the sale of your properties, approximately $8 million, were funneled through the foundation and transferred to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands." I couldn't breathe. $8 million. 15 properties. Gone. "How?" I whispered. "How did he do this?" Detective Mitchell pulled out another document, a power of attorney form dated 1.5 years ago. My signature was at the bottom. I stared at it. I didn't remember signing it. "Do you recall executing this document?" she asked gently. I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. "No, I don't remember." But even as I said it, a memory surfaced, hazy, fragmented, like looking through dirty glass. Sterling sitting beside me at the kitchen table, papers spread out in front of us. his hand guiding mine, his voice soft and reassuring. "Just sign here, sweetheart. It's for the insurance. You trust me, don't you?" I had trusted him. I couldn't read the words. The letters had blurred together meaningless shapes on a page, so I'd signed where he told me to sign, over and over again. "I remember," I said, my voice breaking. "He told me they were insurance papers. He held my hand and guided it. I couldn't read the words. I trusted him." Margaret reached over and gripped my hand. Detective Mitchell's jaw tightened. "There's more." She pulled out another document, a last will and testament dated 6 months ago. "This will leaves everything to the Whitmore Foundation and to Rebecca Whitmore," she said. "Your biological or adopted children are not mentioned. Your personal assets, your estate, everything, it all goes to them." I felt like I was falling, but I would never. "You signed it," Detective Mitchell said quietly, "while you were incapacitated." I closed my eyes, trying to breathe. Sterling hadn't just been poisoning my body. He'd been poisoning my entire life. Detective Mitchell pulled out another set of documents, bank records, investment statements, transaction logs. "We brought in a forensic accountant," she said. "Your husband is in significant financial trouble. He owes over $2 million due to failed investments, high-risk stock trades, real estate ventures that collapsed. He's been using your assets to cover his debts." $2 million, Margaret breathed. "And climbing," Detective Mitchell said. "He was desperate. And you, Mrs. Whitmore, were his solution." I looked down at my hands that had signed away my life without knowing it. "He didn't just try to kill me," I whispered. "He tried to erase me. My mind first, then my legacy." Detective Mitchell nodded grimly. "That's exactly what he did." She gathered the papers and slid them back into the folder. Then she pulled out one more document, a personnel file. "There's something else you need to know," she said, her tone cautious. "Do you know who Rebecca Whitmore is?" I frowned. "She's my nurse. Sterling hired her 2 years ago to take care of me." Detective Mitchell shook her head. "According to employment records and her personnel file at your husband's clinic, Rebecca Whitmore is listed as his daughter." The words didn't make sense. "His daughter?" I repeated. "Yes, she's 35 years old. Her mother's name was Diane Whitmore, Sterling's first wife. They divorced in 1995. I stared at her, my mind reeling. Sterling had a daughter he'd never told me about. A daughter who had been living in my house, watching me, caring for me, while helping her father poison me. "Did you know your husband had a child from a previous marriage?" Detective Mitchell asked gently. "No," I whispered. He told me he'd never been married before me. He said I was his first and only wife." Another lie, another betrayal. Margaret's face had gone white. "That woman has been in Elaine's house for 2 years, sleeping in the guest room, cooking her meals, and she's been helping Sterling the whole time." Detective Mitchell nodded. "We believe so. The video footage shows her as an active participant. She wasn't just complicit, she was part of the plan." I thought of Rebecca's kind smile, her gentle hands, the way she'd brought me tea and tucked blankets around me. All of it a lie. All of it part of the erasure. I looked up at Detective Mitchell, my voice shaking but steady. "What happens now?" She met my eyes. "Now we build a case. We have the video evidence, the financial records, the forged documents. We have enough to arrest both your husband and Rebecca Whitmore on charges of attempted murder, elder abuse fraud, and conspiracy." "When?" Margaret asked. "Soon," Detective Mitchell said. "We're coordinating with the prosecutor's office. But I need you to be prepared, Mrs. Whitmore. This is going to get ugly. Your husband is a prominent physician. He has resources, connections, and a reputation to protect. He's going to fight." I nodded slowly. "Let him fight," I said quietly. "I'm not running anymore." I stared at Rebecca's personnel file, her face smiling up at me from the photograph clipped to the top. How had I not seen it? How had I trusted her? 1 week had passed since I'd been admitted to Harborview. 1 week of clarity, of remembering, of piecing together the nightmare my life had become. And now, sitting in my hospital bed with Detective Mitchell across from me, I was about to learn another terrible truth. Rebecca Whitmore. Detective Mitchell said, tapping the file, 35 years old. Claims to be Sterling Whitmore's daughter from his first marriage to Diane Whitmore, who died in 2006. I couldn't speak. The words felt impossible. Sterling has a daughter. Margaret asked from beside me, her voice sharp with disbelief. Detective Mitchell nodded. That's what she claims. According to her statement, she reconnected with her father 2 years ago, right around the time he began poisoning you. 2 years ago. The timing was too perfect. Where has she been all this time? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She says she was raised by her mother after the divorce, says Sterling abandoned them and she grew up resenting him. But 2 years ago, she reached out and they reconciled. I felt something crack inside me. And then she came to work for him, to help him kill me. Detective Mitchell's expression was grim. That's what the evidence suggests. Margaret leaned forward. Have you questioned her? We brought her in this morning, Detective Mitchell said. She's being interviewed as we speak. She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. I'm going to play you some of the audio from her interrogation. You need to hear this. She hit play. Rebecca's voice filled the small room, high-pitched, defensive, angry. He's my father. He told me what that woman did to us. She destroyed our family. My mother died in poverty because Elaine Whitmore stole my father away from us. The detective's calm voice responded, Ms. Whitmore, we have video evidence of you assisting your father in administering toxic substances to Mrs. Whitmore. That's attempted murder. She deserved it. Rebecca's voice cracked. She took everything from us. My father said she manipulated him, trapped him in a marriage he never wanted. She stole his life. We were just taking back what was ours. Detective Mitchell paused the recording. I sat frozen, my mind reeling. She believes it, Margaret whispered. She actually believes you're the villain. Sterling told her that, I said quietly. He fed her lies. He made her hate me. Detective Mitchell nodded. It's a classic manipulation tactic. He gave her a villain, a reason to justify what she was doing. She's not just an accomplice, she's been radicalized. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to breathe. Sterling had a daughter who hated me, a daughter who had been poisoning me for 2 years. Detective Mitchell set her phone down and pulled out another document. There's a problem, though. I looked up. What kind of problem? Rebecca claims Sterling is her biological father, but we need proof. I've requested a court-ordered DNA test. We'll compare Sterling's DNA to Rebecca's. Why does that matter? Margaret asked. Because if she's not his daughter, Detective Mitchell said, then this entire story is a fabrication, and that opens up a whole new set of questions. I thought of Rebecca's face, young, eager, devoted, the way she'd looked at Sterling with something close to worship. What if she's lying? I asked. Then we need to know why, Detective Mitchell said, and who put her up to it. The detective left a few minutes later, promising to update me as soon as the DNA results came back. Margaret stayed sitting quietly beside me as I stared out the window. My mind was spinning. Sterling told me he couldn't have children. 40 years ago, when we were first married, he'd sat me down and explained with what seemed like genuine sadness that a childhood illness had left him infertile. I'm so sorry, Elaine, he'd said, holding my hands. I know you wanted a family, but it's not possible. It's just going to be the two of us. I had believed him. I had mourned the children we would never have, and I had built my life around that truth. But if Rebecca was his daughter, then he'd lied. For 40 years, he'd lied. And then, like a dam breaking, a memory surfaced, faint, fragmented, but persistent. A little girl with dark curly hair, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing in a sunny kitchen. She was laughing, holding a crayon drawing up to show me, "Look, Mama, I drew us." I had bent down, smiling, pulling her into a hug. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Maya. Oh God, Maya. The memory hit me like a freight train. I had adopted a daughter 30 years ago, a little girl I had found through a private adoption, a child I had loved with everything I had. But Sterling had never wanted her. He'd been cold to her, dismissive. He'd told me I was being foolish, that raising a child alone because he refused to help was a mistake. So I had made a choice. I had hidden her. I had sent her away to live with a trusted friend told Sterling the adoption had fallen through. I had protected her the only way I knew how. And I had stayed in contact with her, secretly, for 30 years, until the fog descended, until the poison took my memory, until I forgot. "Margaret," I said, suddenly my voice shaking, "where's Maya?" Margaret looked at me confused. "Who?" "My daughter." I said, tears streaming down my face. "My daughter Maya. I adopted her 30 years ago. I hid her from Sterling. I haven't spoken to her in months." Margaret's eyes widened. "Elaine, are you sure the toxins—" "I'm sure," I said fiercely. "She's real. She's out there. And I haven't heard from her since I started getting sick." Margaret grabbed my hand. "We'll find her, I promise." But a cold, creeping dread settled over me. If Sterling had found out about Maya, if he knew I had a daughter he'd never met, what would he have done to her? I thought back to the past 6 months. The fog had been so thick. I couldn't remember the last time I'd spoken to Maya. Couldn't remember if she'd called. Couldn't remember if I'd tried to reach her. But I knew deep in my bones that Maya would never abandon me, which meant Sterling had done something. He'd blocked her calls. He'd intercepted her emails. He'd told her lies, or worse. My chest tightened. "We need to find her," I said, my voice urgent. "We need to find her now." Margaret pulled out her phone. "Do you remember her number, her address?" I closed my eyes, trying to pull the information from the fog. "Baltimore," I said. "She lives in Baltimore. She works for the FBI." Margaret's eyebrows shot up. "The FBI, she's a forensic psychologist." I said, the details coming back to me now. "She specializes in elder abuse cases. I stopped, my breath catching. Oh my God, she would have known. If she'd seen me, if she'd talked to me, she would have known exactly what Sterling was doing. "So he made sure she couldn't reach you," Margaret said grimly. "Yes," I whispered. "He isolated me from everyone. But Maya, she's trained to see through lies. She would have figured it out." "Then we need to call her," Margaret said. "Right now." But as she reached for her phone, a terrible thought occurred to me. What if Sterling had already gotten to her? What if he'd convinced her I didn't want to see her anymore? What if he'd told her I was too sick, too confused, too far gone? What if she thinks I abandoned her? I whispered. Margaret squeezed my hand. "Then we'll tell her the truth. We'll bring her home." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I had spent 30 years protecting Maya from Sterling, and now I needed her to protect me. I was finally beginning to feel like myself again when a man in an expensive suit walked into my hospital room. I recognized him immediately, and my heart clenched. Richard Thornton, my family attorney for the past 20 years. He stood in the doorway, briefcase in hand, his silver hair perfectly combed, his expression a careful blend of concern and professional detachment. "Elaine," he said, warmly stepping inside, "I'm so relieved to see you're doing better." Margaret, who had been reading beside my bed, looked up sharply. She didn't move from her chair. "Mr. Thornton," I said carefully, "what are you doing here?" He smiled, that same reassuring smile I'd trusted for 2 decades. "I heard about your hospitalization. Sterling is beside himself with worry. I wanted to check on you personally and make sure you're getting the care you need." "Sterling sent you," I said. It wasn't a question. Thornton's smile didn't waver. "He's your husband, Elaine. He's concerned. And frankly, so am I. This whole situation, the accusations, the police involvement, it's all just a terrible misunderstanding between husband and wife." "A misunderstanding," I repeated slowly. "Yes." He set his briefcase down and pulled out a chair uninvited. I've reviewed the claims being made, and I have to say they're quite extraordinary. Heavy metal poisoning, financial fraud. These are serious allegations, Elaine, and they require serious evidence. We have evidence, Margaret said sharply. Thornton glanced at her as if noticing her for the first time. And you are Margaret Hayes, Elaine's neighbor, and her friend. Ah. Thornton's smile thinned. Well, Mrs. Hayes, I'm afraid this is a private legal matter between my client and her husband. I'm not your client anymore, I said quietly. Thornton turned back to me, his expression shifting to something almost paternal. Elaine, you've been through a terrible ordeal. You're confused. Let me help you. Let me bring you home, get you proper care. I'm not confused, I said, my voice steady. And I'm not going home. His smile finally faded. Dr. Ryan Matthews appeared in the doorway, his expression tense. Mr. Thornton, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Mrs. Whitmore is under medical observation and she's not receiving visitors without approval. Thornton stood pulling a business card from his pocket. Dr. Matthews, I'm Mrs. Whitmore's attorney. I have a right to see my client and review her medical records. Your former attorney, Dr. Matthews said coolly, and you have no right to her medical records without her explicit written consent. Thornton's jaw tightened. This is highly irregular. I'll be filing a formal complaint. File whatever you like, Dr. Matthews said. But you're leaving. Now. For a moment, Thornton stood there, his eyes flicking between me and the doctor. Then he picked up his briefcase and walked to the door. He paused, turning back to me. Elaine, please. Think carefully about what you're doing. Sterling is a respected physician. You're accusing him of terrible things. If you're wrong, I'm not wrong, I said. Thornton's expression hardened. Then he turned and walked out. Margaret exhaled sharply. That man makes my skin crawl. Dr. Matthews closed the door and came to my bedside. Are you okay? I nodded, but my hands were shaking. He's been my lawyer for 20 years. He helped me with property transactions, contracts, estate planning. I trusted him. A memory surfaced, hazy but persistent. Thornton sitting at my kitchen table, papers spread out in front of us. Sterling standing behind me, his hand on my shoulder. Just sign here, Elaine. It's routine paperwork. Nothing to worry about. I had signed. I couldn't read the words. The letters swam on the page. But Thornton's voice had been so calm, so reassuring. That's perfect. You're doing great. He came to my house, I whispered. When I was sick, he brought documents. He told me to sign them. Sterling was always there watching. Dr. Matthews' expression darkened. What kind of documents? I don't know, I said, my voice breaking. I couldn't read them. I trusted him. An hour later, Detective Mitchell arrived, her face grim. We've been investigating Richard Thornton, she said, sitting down across from me, and what we found is significant. She pulled out a folder and opened it. Inside were bank statements, transaction records, and printed emails. Thornton received $500,000 from the Whitmore Foundation over the past 18 months, she said, payments disguised as legal consultation fees. But the foundation has no active legal matters. It's a shell, remember? I stared at the numbers. $500,000. There's more, Detective Mitchell continued. We found correspondence between Thornton and your husband, emails discussing your deteriorating mental state and the need to secure the estate. She pulled out a printed email and read aloud. Don't worry, even if she regains clarity, any court will say she's been non-compos mentis for years. I've backdated the medical records perfectly. No one will question the transfers. The words hit me like a physical blow. He falsified medical records, Margaret asked, her voice shaking. It appears so, Detective Mitchell said. We're working with the medical board to verify, but yes, it looks like Thornton created a paper trail showing you were mentally incompetent long before you actually began experiencing symptoms. I couldn't breathe. He's also in debt, Detective Mitchell added. Gambling debt specifically. And we found records showing he's known Sterling since college. They were fraternity brothers. So this was planned, I said quietly. For years. Detective Mitchell nodded. We believe Thornton was brought in early. He helped create the legal framework to transfer your assets and make it look legitimate. I looked down at my hands. My husband, my nurse, my lawyer. How many people had been part of this? How many others? I whispered. How many people were involved? Detective Mitchell's expression was grim. We're still investigating, but Mrs. Whitmore, I need you to understand this wasn't just a crime of opportunity. This was a conspiracy, planned, coordinated, and executed over years. I closed my eyes, trying to hold myself together. Sterling hadn't just wanted to kill me. He'd wanted to erase me completely, legally, financially, mentally, and he'd enlisted an army to do it. That night, after Margaret had gone home and the hospital had gone quiet, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Then I heard a voice I hadn't heard in 6 months, a voice choked with emotion, desperate and raw. Mom, is it really you? My breath caught. Maya. Oh my God, she sobbed. Mom, I've been trying to reach you for months. Rebecca kept telling me you didn't want to talk to me, that you were too sick, that I was upsetting you. I didn't know what to believe. Margaret called me yesterday and told me everything. I'm on a plane right now. I'm coming to Seattle. I'm coming to you. Tears streamed down my face. I'm here, sweetheart. I whispered. I'm here. I thought I'd lost you. Maya said, her voice breaking. I thought you'd forgotten me. Never, I said. I could never forget you. And as I sat in that hospital bed, holding the phone to my ear, listening to my daughter cry, I realized something. Rebecca hadn't just been Sterling's accomplice. She'd been the gatekeeper. She'd isolated me from the one person who could have saved me. But she'd failed, because Maya was coming. And this time, I wasn't alone. Hearing Maya's voice broke something inside me, a dam I'd been holding back for months. And with it, the memories came flooding back. Mom, she said again, her voice thick with tears. I've been trying to reach you for months. I called every week. I sent emails. I even tried calling the house, but Rebecca always answered and said you were sleeping or you were too confused to talk or, wait, I interrupted, my mind racing. What do you mean you called Sterling, told me you were busy with work? He said you were traveling for the FBI. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Traveling. Maya's voice was quiet, sharp. Mom, I haven't traveled for work in over a year. I've been in Baltimore the whole time. I kept calling, and Rebecca kept telling me you didn't want to talk to me. Then I started getting emails from your account saying you needed space, that I was stressing you out, that you'd contact me when you were ready. My blood ran cold. I never sent those emails. I know that now, Maya said, her voice breaking. Margaret told me everything. She told me about the poisoning, about Sterling, about Rebecca. Mom, he told me you were in Europe. He said you and Margaret had taken a trip and you'd be gone for months. I didn't know what to believe. I closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face. Sterling had cut us off from each other. Completely. Rebecca had been the gatekeeper, answering my phone, responding to Maya's emails, feeding us both lies. They had isolated me from the one person who could have saved me, Maya. I whispered, I never stopped thinking about you, even when I couldn't remember, even when everything was foggy. I knew I had a daughter. I just couldn't reach you. I'm here now, Mom, she said fiercely. I'm on a plane. I'll be there in 6 hours. I'm not letting anyone keep us apart again. And then, as if a door had been unlocked in my mind, the memories came rushing back. 1995. 30 years ago, I was 42 years old, standing in a children's home on the outskirts of Seattle. The building smelled like disinfectant and old wood. A fire had destroyed a neighboring orphanage 3 months earlier, and the survivors had been relocated here. That's where I met her. Maya, 8 years old with dark curly hair and eyes that looked too old for her face. She sat alone in the corner of the playroom, drawing in a notebook while the other children ran and screamed around her. Who's that? I asked the social worker. Maya, she said quietly. She lost her parents in the fire. No other family. She's been here 2 months and she hasn't spoken a word. I knelt down beside her. Hi, Maya. My name is Elaine. What are you drawing?" She looked up at me, her eyes wary. Then slowly she turned the notebook around. It was a picture of a house, with two people standing in front of it, a woman and a little girl. "That's beautiful," I said softly. She stared at me for a long moment. Then in a whisper so quiet I almost didn't hear it, she said, "Can you be my mom?" My heart shattered. I went home that night and told Sterling I wanted to adopt her. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Absolutely not," he said. "I will not raise someone else's child. We agreed, no children. I can't have them, and that's the end of it." "But she needs us," I said. "She has no one." "Then let the state take care of her," Sterling said coldly. "I'm not doing this, Elaine. Don't ask me again." But I couldn't let it go, so I did it in secret. I hired a private attorney, not Thornton, someone Sterling didn't know. I set up a trust fund in Maya's name and arranged for her to live with a kind retired couple in Maryland, the Hartwells, who agreed to raise her as their own. I visited her once a month, telling Sterling I was doing charity work. I sent $2,000 every month to cover her expenses, school clothes, everything she needed. And I loved her. From a distance, but fiercely. Sterling never knew. For 30 years, he never knew. Maya grew up strong. She went to college, then graduate school. She became a forensic psychologist, smart-driven, compassionate. We spoke every Sunday. We emailed constantly. She called me Mom, and I called her my daughter. And then 6 months ago, the calls stopped. The emails went unanswered. I thought she was angry with me. I thought I'd done something wrong. But it wasn't her. It was them. Sterling and Rebecca had severed the connection piece by piece until I was completely alone. "I kept you safe from him for 30 years. I whispered into the phone, my voice breaking. "And now he's trying to take everything." "Not everything, Mom." Maya said, her voice steady and fierce. "He doesn't know about me. He doesn't know I exist. And that means we have an advantage." "What do you mean?" "I'm a forensic psychologist, Mom. I've worked on elder abuse cases, financial exploitation, coercive control. I know how men like Sterling operate, and I'm going to help you take him down." I felt something stir inside me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. 24 hours later, I stood by the hospital window watching the street below. A taxi pulled up to the curb. The back door opened and a woman stepped out, tall, confident, dressed in a dark blazer and jeans. She had my curly hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked up at the hospital building, took a deep breath, and started toward the entrance. My daughter, Maya. She was home, and Sterling had no idea she even existed. I turned to Margaret, who stood beside me, tears in her eyes. "She's here," I whispered. Margaret squeezed my hand. "You're not alone anymore, Elaine." I watched Maya disappear through the hospital doors, heading toward the elevator. In a few minutes, she would walk into this room. In a few minutes, I would hold my daughter for the first time in 6 months. And together, we would make sure Sterling Whitmore never hurt anyone again. Before I take you to the moment Sterling Whitmore was finally arrested, comment "Justice" below if you believe the truth deserves to be told. I need to know you're still here. And a reminder, while this story includes fictional elements for storytelling purposes, the lessons about survival and standing up for yourself are invaluable. If you'd rather not hear what comes next, you're free to leave now. They arrested him on a rainy Thursday morning. I watched from my hospital window as police cars surrounded his clinic on Madison Street. 3 weeks had passed since I'd been admitted to Harborview. 3 weeks of detoxification, recovery, and waiting for the evidence to be compiled, waiting for the warrants to be signed, waiting for justice. And now, finally, it was happening. Maya stood beside me, her hand resting on my shoulder. Margaret sat in the chair by my bed, her eyes fixed on the scene unfolding on the news channel playing on the television. "They're going in," Maya said quietly. I watched as detectives in dark suits and uniformed officers walked through the glass doors of the Sterling Whitmore Neurology Clinic. I imagined the receptionist's face, the patients in the waiting room, looking up in confusion. I imagined Sterling in his office, perhaps reviewing a chart or speaking to a colleague, unaware that his world was about to collapse. Detective Mitchell had called me an hour earlier. "We have everything we need, Mrs. Whitmore. The video footage, the toxicology reports, the financial records, the emails with Thornton. The prosecutor has approved the arrest warrants. We're moving this morning." I had thanked her, my voice steady. And now I stood at the window watching my husband of 40 years being led out of his clinic in handcuffs. Sterling appeared in the doorway flanked by 2 detectives. His face was pale, his expression stunned. He was still wearing his white coat, his name embroidered on the chest. Dr. Sterling Whitmore, M.D., a man patients had trusted, a man I had trusted. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. Sterling kept his head down as the detectives guided him toward an unmarked car. For a moment, just before he ducked into the back seat, he looked up toward the hospital, toward my window. I don't know if he could see me from that distance, but I stared back at him, my jaw set, my hands steady. He had tried to erase me, but I was still here. Margaret turned up the volume on the television. The news anchor's voice filled the room, crisp and professional. "Breaking news this morning, prominent Seattle neurologist Dr. Sterling Whitmore has been arrested on charges of attempted murder, elder abuse, financial exploitation, fraud, and conspiracy. According to King County prosecutors, Dr. Whitmore allegedly poisoned his wife, 65-year-old Elaine Whitmore, with heavy metals over a 2-year period while simultaneously transferring millions of dollars in assets to offshore accounts. The investigation led by Detective Sarah Mitchell of the Elder Abuse Unit uncovered video evidence allegedly showing Dr. Whitmore preparing toxic substances and administering them to his wife. The screen cut to footage of Sterling being escorted from the clinic. Also arrested this morning was Seattle attorney Richard Thornton, who prosecutors say conspired with Dr. Whitmore to falsify legal documents and medical records. Thornton allegedly received $500,000 from a shell foundation controlled by Dr. Whitmore. Maya squeezed my shoulder. "It's over, Mom." I nodded, but I couldn't speak. It wasn't over. Not yet. An hour later, my hospital phone rang. I stared at the number. I didn't recognize it. Maya frowned. "Don't answer that." But something told me I should. I picked up. "Elaine." Sterling's voice, cold, sharp. "How are you calling me?" I asked. "They gave me my phone call," he said. "I chose to call you." There was a long silence. "You're going to regret this," he said quietly. "You have no idea what you've done. Do you think you can destroy me? Do you think anyone will believe you over me? I'm a respected physician. You're a confused old woman who can't even remember signing her own name." His words were meant to wound me. Once they would have, but not anymore. "I know exactly what I've done," I said, my voice steady and calm. "I survived you." Sterling laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Survived, Elaine? You've just signed your own death warrant. Do you think this ends with me in jail? You have no idea how deep this goes." "Then I guess we'll find out," I said, and I hung up. My hands were shaking. Maya took the phone from me and set it down. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm fine." Margaret stood and came to my side. "He's trying to scare you." "I know," I said, "but I'm not scared anymore." A few minutes later, Detective Mitchell walked into the room. Her expression was serious. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, "we just received the DNA results for Rebecca Whitmore." I straightened. Maya turned her full attention on the detective. "And?" I asked. Detective Mitchell pulled a folded document from her folder and handed it to me. I unfolded it with trembling hands. The text was dense, filled with medical terminology and genetic markers I didn't understand. But 2 lines were highlighted in yellow. Probability of paternity 0. 0% conclusion. Sterling Whitmore is excluded as the biological father of Rebecca Whitmore. I stared at the words, my mind spinning. "He's not her father," I whispered. "No," Detective Mitchell said. "He's not." Maya leaned over my shoulder, reading the report. "Then who is she?" Detective Mitchell shook her head. "We don't know yet. Rebecca is still claiming Sterling is her father, but the science doesn't lie. She has no biological relationship to him whatsoever." "So she lied," Margaret said. "Why would she lie about that?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Detective Mitchell said. We've brought her back in for questioning, but she's not talking. She's hired a lawyer and invoked her right to remain silent. I looked down at the paper in my hands. Rebecca wasn't Sterling's daughter. She had no connection to him at all. So why had she helped him? Why had she spent 2 years of her life poisoning me, isolating me, erasing me? What could possibly motivate someone to do that? There's something else, Detective Mitchell said. We ran Rebecca's DNA through the national database. We got a hit. My heart stopped. A hit? Maya asked sharply. Detective Mitchell nodded. Rebecca Whitmore isn't her real name. Her real name is Rebecca Caldwell. She has a sealed juvenile record from Ohio aggravated assault and fraud when she was 17. She served 2 years in a juvenile facility and was released in 2007. After that, she disappeared, changed her name, changed her identity, until she showed up in Seattle 2 years ago. I felt the room tilt. She's a criminal, Margaret breathed. Yes, Detective Mitchell said, and we believe Sterling hired her specifically for this. We just don't know how they connected or what he promised her in return. Maya crossed her arms, her face cold and analytical. Money. It's always money. He promised her a cut of the estate. Detective Mitchell nodded. That's our working theory. We're going through her financial records now. I looked down at the DNA report again. Rebecca Caldwell. A stranger. A hired accomplice. Someone who had smiled at me, brought me tea-tucked blankets around me while slowly killing me. Who is she really? I whispered. Detective Mitchell met my eyes. That's what we're going to find out. Detective Mitchell let me listen to Rebecca's interrogation through a one-way speaker. What I heard changed everything I thought I knew about her. I sat in a small observation room adjacent to the interview room, Margaret beside me. Through the glass, I could see Rebecca sitting at a metal table, her hands folded in front of her, her face pale and drawn. Detective Mitchell sat across from her, a file folder open on the table. Ms. Caldwell. The detective began, "We have the DNA results." Rebecca's head snapped up. "My name is Rebecca Whitmore." "No," Detective Mitchell said quietly. "It's not. Your birth name is Rebecca Caldwell, and according to the paternity test, Sterling Whitmore is not your biological father." For a long moment, Rebecca just stared. Then she whispered, "That's not possible. He has to be my father." Detective Mitchell slid a document across the table. Probability of paternity 0%. He has no biological relationship to you at all. Rebecca's hands trembled as she picked up the paper. I watched her eyes move across the lines, reading the same words I had read the day before. Then she set the paper down very carefully and pressed her hands to her face. "He told me," she whispered. "He told me he was my father. He told me my mother lied to me, that she kept us apart, that Elaine Whitmore destroyed our family." Detective Mitchell leaned forward. "Rebecca, your mother did have an affair. We confirmed that through medical records, but Sterling knew about it. He knew you weren't his biological child. He hid that information during the divorce so he wouldn't have to pay child support or alimony. And then years later, when he needed someone to help him, he found you." Rebecca looked up, her face crumpling. "He used me." "Yes," Detective Mitchell said. "He did." Margaret's hand tightened on mine. I watched Rebecca through the glass, and for the first time I saw her not as my poisoner, but as what she truly was. Another victim. Detective Mitchell pulled out another document, a printed email. "This is an email from Sterling to Richard Thornton dated 6 months ago," she said, reading aloud. "Rebecca is useful because she believes the lie. She'll do anything to hurt Elaine. It's almost pathetic how easy it is to manipulate her." Rebecca flinched, as if she'd been struck. "He called me pathetic," she whispered. "He used your pain," Detective Mitchell said. "He fed you a story that Elaine was the villain, that she stole your father, that your mother died in poverty because of her. None of it was true, but you believed it because you wanted a father. You wanted to belong to someone." Rebecca's shoulders shook. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. I looked away, my chest tight. "There's something else," Detective Mitchell said, pulling out a stack of medical files. "We found these in Sterling's home office. PET scans, blood test results, diagnostic reports, all showing severe Alzheimer's disease, all with Elaine Whitmore's name on them. Rebecca looked up, her face blotchy and red. I saw those. He showed them to me. He said she was dying, that she was suffering, that we were just speeding up the inevitable. Detective Mitchell shook her head. They're fake, every single one. The scans are from other patients. The reports are fabricated. Elaine Whitmore never had Alzheimer's disease. Rebecca stared at her. Her expression shattered. But the pills. He said they were Alzheimer's medication. They weren't, Detective Mitchell said. The bottles were relabeled. Inside were heavy metal compounds, mercury, lead, cadmium. You were poisoning her, Rebecca. Sterling gave you the tools and the lie, and you did the work. Rebecca doubled over, a guttural sob escaping her throat. I killed her, she choked out. I almost killed her. But you didn't, Detective Mitchell said firmly. She's alive, and you have a choice now. You can continue protecting the man who used you, or you can help us make sure he never does this to anyone else. Rebecca wiped her face with shaking hands. What do you want me to do? Testify, Detective Mitchell said. Tell the jury everything. What he told you, what he gave you, how he manipulated you. With your testimony and the video evidence, we can put him away for the rest of his life. Rebecca looked down at her hands, hands that had held poison, hands that had brought me tea laced with toxins, hands that had nearly killed me. I'll do it, she whispered. I'll testify. A different detective stepped into the observation room and handed Detective Mitchell a phone. It's Maya Hartwell. She says it's urgent. Detective Mitchell took the phone and stepped into the hallway. Margaret and I exchanged glances. Through the doorway, I could hear Detective Mitchell's side of the conversation. Yes, Ms. Hartwell. You found what? A life insurance policy. How much? There was a long pause. $5 million. When was it taken out? 3 years ago. And the beneficiary is... Another pause. A Delaware company. Can you trace it? I see. Email me everything you have. We need a warrant immediately. She came back into the room, her face grim. That was your daughter, she said to me. She's been investigating Sterling's financial records from Baltimore. She found a life insurance policy he took out on you 3 years ago. $5 million. My breath caught. $5 million. The beneficiary is a company called Whitmore Holdings, LLC, registered in Delaware. Maya says it was set up the same month Sterling started purchasing heavy metals online. Detective Mitchell's jaw tightened. Mrs. Whitmore, he wasn't just trying to steal your assets. He wanted you dead. And based on the timeline, he's been planning this for at least 3 years, a full year before he even started poisoning you. Margaret's hand gripped mine so hard it hurt. There's more, Detective Mitchell said quietly. Maya ran a search on similar cases. She found 2 other elderly women in the Pacific Northwest who died under suspicious circumstances in the past decade. Both were married to physicians. Both had their estates transferred to offshore accounts before their deaths. Both were ruled natural causes at the time. I felt the room tilt. You think Sterling... I think... Detective Mitchell said, this may not be the first time he's done this. We're reopening those investigations now. She looked at me, her expression serious. Your daughter saved your life, Mrs. Whitmore. If she hadn't pushed Margaret to call 911 that day, if she hadn't kept digging, you'd be another statistic. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed. My daughter, my brilliant, brave daughter, working from 3,000 miles away to save me. When is she coming? I whispered. She's on a plane right now, Detective Mitchell said. She'll be here tomorrow afternoon. She wants to testify as a forensic psychology expert. And Mrs. Whitmore, she's bringing evidence that's going to bury him. I was standing by the window thinking about the upcoming trial when I heard the door open softly behind me. A voice I would recognize anywhere whispered, "Mom!" I turned. Maya stood in the doorway, still wearing her travel clothes, dark jeans, a blazer, a carry-on bag slung over her shoulder. Her eyes were red-rimmed and shining with tears. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she crossed the room in 3 steps, and I pulled her into my arms. We held each other and wept. "I'm so sorry," Maya said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I should have come sooner. I should have known something was wrong." "You couldn't have known," I said, stroking her hair. "He made sure of that." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "He told me you were in Europe, that you and Margaret had taken a trip to recover from stress. He sent me emails from your account saying you needed space, that I was overwhelming you with my calls." "I never wrote those," I said. "I know that now," Maya said, her voice breaking. "But at the time I didn't know what to believe. He was so convincing. And then Rebecca started answering your phone saying you were sleeping or too confused to talk. I thought—" She stopped, pressing her hand to her mouth. "I thought you were slipping away from me, that maybe you didn't want me anymore." "Never," I said fiercely, taking her hands. "I have never stopped wanting you, not for a single day in 30 years. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Margaret appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of tea and a box of tissues. She set them down on the table and quietly left, closing the door behind her. Maya and I sat down together on the small couch by the window. For a long time, we just held hands, not speaking. "Do you remember," I said finally, "the first time I took you to the aquarium?" Maya smiled through her tears. "I was 9. You told Sterling you were going to a real estate conference in Tacoma, and we spent the whole day looking at jellyfish," I said. "You were obsessed with them." "I still am," Maya said with a small laugh. "I have a jellyfish lamp in my apartment in Baltimore." I squeezed her hand. "Every month I looked forward to seeing you. Those charity events, those weekend trips, they were never about work. They were about you." "I know," Maya said softly. "Mrs. Hartwell told me everything when I turned 18. She said you'd been paying for my care since I was 8, that you visited as often as you could, that you loved me, even though you couldn't bring me home." "I wanted to," I said, my voice thick. "I wanted to so badly, but Sterling—" "I know," Maya said. "He would have hurt me, or driven you away from me. You did the only thing you could." She reached into her carry-on bag and pulled out a thick envelope. "I brought these," she said, handing it to me. I opened it. Inside were documents, legal papers, emails, photographs. The adoption certificate from 1995, stamped and notarized. Printed emails spanning 3 decades, my words to Maya, her words to me, a private conversation Sterling had never known about. And at the bottom, a copy of my will. My real will, drafted 20 years ago with a private attorney Sterling had never met. 40% of your estate goes to me," Maya said quietly. "The rest to charity. Sterling isn't mentioned anywhere." I stared at the document, my hands shaking. "How did you get this?" "You gave it to Mrs. Hartwell for safekeeping when I was 15, Maya said. "She gave it to me when I turned 21. You told her that if anything ever happened to you, I needed to have proof." I pressed my hand to my mouth, overwhelmed. I had forgotten. But some part of me, some lucid, desperate part of me, had known even then that Sterling was dangerous. And I had protected my daughter. "You saved me once," Maya said, her voice steady now. "You pulled me out of that orphanage after the fire and gave me a life. Now it's my turn to save you." "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry I couldn't bring you home." Maya shook her head. "Mom, you gave me everything. You gave me life twice. Once when you adopted me, and again when you kept me away from him. If I'd grown up in that house—" She trailed off, her expression dark. "He would have destroyed me just like he tried to destroy you." I pulled her close again, holding her tight. "I love you," I said. "I have always loved you." "I love you too, Mom," she whispered. A soft knock on the door interrupted us. Detective Mitchell stepped inside, her expression apologetic. "I hate to interrupt," she said, "but we have a problem." Maya and I pulled apart, wiping our eyes. "What kind of problem?" I asked. Detective Mitchell crossed her arms. "Sterling's attorney is building a defense strategy. They're claiming that your memories are unreliable due to cognitive decline. They're going to argue that you're a confused elderly woman who doesn't understand what really happened and that Sterling was simply trying to care for you. My stomach dropped. They're going to say I'm senile, I said quietly. Yes, Detective Mitchell said, and without expert testimony to counter that claim, a jury might believe it. She looked at Maya. That's where you come in. We need you to testify as a forensic psychologist. You can explain the effects of heavy metal poisoning, the difference between toxin-induced confusion and actual dementia, and how coercive control works. You can prove that your mother's memories are credible. Maya stood her jaw set. She squeezed my hand and turned to Detective Mitchell with a confidence I recognized the same determination I'd seen in her eyes when she was 8 years old and asked me to be her mother. That's exactly why I'm here, she said. The prosecution team had been building the case for weeks. Now sitting in a conference room with Maya beside me, I finally understood the scale of the battle we were facing. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Parker spread files across the long table stacks of documents, photographs, DVDs labeled with dates. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and meticulous, with a reputation for winning elder abuse cases. Mrs. Whitmore. She began, "We have an exceptionally strong case, but I need you to understand what you're going to face in that courtroom." I nodded, my hands folded in my lap. Margaret sat on my other side, steady and silent. "Let's start with the evidence," ADA Parker said, pulling out a chart. "We have 3 months of video footage showing your husband preparing toxic substances and administering them to you. We have toxicology reports confirming mercury and lead poisoning. We have financial records showing the transfer of $8 million in assets to offshore accounts. We have emails between Dr. Whitmore and Richard Thornton discussing the falsification of medical records and legal documents. And we have Rebecca Caldwell's testimony, in which she will describe how your husband manipulated her into becoming his accomplice." She looked at me. "This is one of the most documented elder abuse cases I've ever prosecuted." "What are the charges?" Maya asked. "Attempted murder, elder abuse, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, fraud, forgery, and criminal conspiracy," ADA Parker said. "If convicted on all counts, Dr. Whitmore is looking at 25 to 30 years in prison." I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. 25 to 30 years. Sterling would die in prison. "Our strategy," ADA Parker continued, "is to show the jury a clear pattern of premeditated, calculated abuse. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a systematic erasure of a human being carried out over years with multiple accomplices." She pulled out a timeline poster, a visual representation of Sterling's crimes, color-coded and detailed. "We'll call Dr. Ryan Matthews to testify about the medical evidence. Margaret Hayes will describe how she discovered the abuse and installed the cameras. Rebecca Caldwell will explain how Dr. Whitmore manipulated her. And Maya," she turned to my daughter, "you'll testify as a forensic psychology expert. You'll explain coercive control, gaslighting, and the psychological impact of chronic poisoning." Maya nodded. "I'm ready." ADA Parker looked at me. "And you, Mrs. Whitmore, will tell your story, but I need to prepare you for what's coming." She pulled out a chair and sat across from me, her expression serious. "Sterling's defense attorney is David Brennan. He's one of the best in the state. His strategy will be to paint you as a confused, unreliable narrator. He'll argue that you have dementia, that your memories are fabricated, that you misunderstood your husband's intentions." I swallowed hard. "But the video evidence—" "He'll argue the videos show a doctor caring for his ill wife," Ada Parker said. "He'll say you consented to experimental treatment. He'll twist every piece of evidence to make Sterling look like a devoted husband and you look like a paranoid, delusional woman." Margaret's hand tightened on mine. "So what do we do?" I asked quietly. "We prepare you," ADA Parker said. "We practice. We make sure you can answer his questions calmly and clearly without breaking down. We make sure the jury sees you as credible." For the next 2 hours, Ada Parker played the role of defense attorney, firing questions at me. "Mrs. Whitmore, isn't it true that you've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease?" "Mrs. Whitmore." How can you be sure your husband was poisoning you when you admittedly can't remember large portions of the past 2 years? Isn't it possible that you've simply misunderstood your husband's actions, that he was trying to help you? Each question felt like a knife. But I answered, slowly, carefully, with Maya's hand in mine. When the session ended, Maya and I stepped outside into the cool evening air. We stood on the courthouse steps, watching the city lights flicker on. "Mom," Maya said quietly, "I want you to understand what Sterling did to you from a psychological perspective." I looked at her. "What he did is called coercive control combined with chemical manipulation," she said. "He didn't just poison your body, he poisoned your perception of reality. That's gaslighting. He made you doubt your own mind, made you dependent on him, isolated you from everyone who could help you. And then when you were at your most vulnerable, he tried to erase you completely." I felt tears prick my eyes. "But he didn't succeed," Maya said fiercely, "because you fought back, because Margaret saw through his lies, because you installed those cameras even when you couldn't remember why. Some part of you, the strongest part of you, survived." I pulled her close, holding her tight. The night before the trial, Maya and I drove to the house on Highland Drive. It stood dark, and empty yellow police tape still stretched across the front door. The garden I had planted years ago was overgrown. The windows were black. I stood on the sidewalk staring at the place where I had almost died. "Are you ready?" Maya asked softly. I thought about the woman I had been 4 months ago, confused, frightened, trapped in a fog of poison and lies. I thought about the woman I was now, clear-minded, surrounded by people who loved me, armed with the truth. "Yes," I said, "I'm ready." Tomorrow I would face the man who had tried to erase me. Tomorrow the world would know the truth. Tomorrow I would take my life back. Maya squeezed my hand. "Then let's finish this." We turned and walked back to the car, leaving the dark house behind us. The trial would begin at 9 a.m., and I would be there. The courtroom fell silent as I walked toward my seat. Sterling sat at the defense table in an expensive charcoal suit, looking every bit the respected physician. His silver hair was perfectly combed, his posture straight and dignified. But when our eyes met, I didn't look away. For 40 years I had looked away. Not anymore. The Honorable Judge Patricia Coleman presided, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She banged her gavel once. "The state of Washington versus Dr. Sterling Whitmore," she said. "Charges include attempted murder, elder abuse, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, fraud, forgery, and criminal conspiracy. Assistant District Attorney Parker, you may proceed with your opening statement." A DA, Jennifer Parker, stood buttoning her blazer. She walked to the center of the courtroom and faced the jury, 12 men and women of varying ages, all watching intently. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury." She began, her voice calm and clear. "This is a case about betrayal, about a man who took an oath to heal and instead used his medical knowledge to destroy the woman who loved him. Over the course of this trial, you will see video evidence of Dr. Sterling Whitmore preparing toxic substances and administering them to his wife, Elaine Whitmore. You will hear testimony from medical experts, from witnesses, and from Mrs. Whitmore herself. And when you have seen all the evidence, I am confident you will find the defendant guilty on all counts." She returned to her seat. Sterling's attorney, David Brennan, stood next. He was tall, mid-50s, with a practiced air of confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, "what you will see in this courtroom is a tragedy but not a crime. Dr. Whitmore is a devoted husband who spent 2 years caring for his wife as she declined into dementia. The so-called evidence you will see has been misinterpreted, manipulated, and taken out of context by a prosecution desperate to convict an innocent man. My client is not a criminal. He is a victim of a misunderstanding." He sat down. I felt my jaw clench. Misunderstanding. The prosecution called its first witness. The state calls Dr. Ryan Matthews. Dr. Matthews took the stand, his hand on the Bible as he swore to tell the truth. He looked professional in a dark suit, his expression serious. Ada Parker approached. "Dr. Matthews, you treated Mrs. Whitmore when she was admitted to Harborview Medical Center on September 18th. Can you describe her condition? Yes, Dr. Matthews said. Mrs. Whitmore presented with symptoms that were initially attributed to Alzheimer's disease memory loss, confusion, tremors, loss of balance. However, her symptoms were erratic and inconsistent with typical Alzheimer's progression. I ordered a toxicology panel. And what did you find? Dangerously elevated levels of mercury and lead in her bloodstream, Dr. Matthews said. Levels 10 times higher than the safety threshold. These levels are consistent with chronic deliberate exposure over a period of at least 2 years. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. In your medical opinion, Doctor Matthews, could these levels have occurred naturally or accidentally? No, he said firmly. Absolutely not. David Brennan stood for cross-examination. Dr. Matthews, isn't it possible that Mrs. Whitmore was exposed to these metals through environmental sources, old paint-contaminated water? Not at these levels, Dr. Matthews said, and not with this pattern of accumulation. Brennan nodded as if conceding the point, but I could see the calculation in his eyes. The prosecution called Margaret Hayes next. Margaret took the stand with her head high, her voice steady as she described how she had noticed my decline, how she had helped me install the hidden cameras, and how she had found me unconscious at the bottom of the stairs. I knew something was wrong, Margaret said. Elaine was my friend. I'd known her for 20 years, and I watched her disappear right in front of me. Ada Parker held up a small clock. Is this one of the cameras you installed? Yes, Margaret said. We hid 3 of them. They recorded continuously for 3 months. And what did those recordings show? They showed Dr. Whitmore poisoning his wife. Margaret set her voice hard, deliberately, methodically, and they showed him planning to do it until she was brain damaged beyond recovery. The jury shifted in their seats, some leaning forward. Then came the moment I had been dreading. The state would like to play video evidence for the jury, Ada Parker said. The lights dimmed. A large screen was wheeled to the center of the courtroom. The video began. I watched Sterling appear on the screen standing in our bathroom wearing latex gloves. He ground pills into powder, added white crystals from a vial, and funneled the mixture into my vitamin bottle. The courtroom was utterly silent. Then Rebecca appeared on screen. Is it ready? This batch should last another 2 weeks. How much longer, Sterling? She's getting worse. Just a few more months. The neurological damage will become permanent. After that, no court will question the will. I heard a juror gasp. Sterling sat motionless at the defense table, his face expressionless, but I could see the tightness in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the edge of the table. The video ended. The lights came back on. Several jurors were staring at Sterling with undisguised disgust. One woman in the back row had tears in her eyes. Rebecca, sitting in the gallery as a witness waiting to testify, turned her face away, her shoulders shaking. Ada Parker let the silence hang for a long moment. No further questions, Your Honor, she said quietly. Judge Coleman glanced at the clock. We'll adjourn for the day. Court will resume tomorrow at 9 a.m. The gavel banged. As the courtroom began to empty, Sterling stood abruptly. His face was pale, his hands trembling. He muttered. I need to use the restroom. A bailiff stepped forward to escort him. Sterling walked toward the side door, his movements stiff and jerky. Maya leaned close to me, her voice low. Mom, something's wrong. He looks desperate. I watched Sterling disappear through the door and a cold chill ran down my spine. Desperate men do desperate things. Margaret touched my arm. Elaine, are you okay? I nodded slowly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go very, very wrong. The bailiff returned a moment later, his face tight. He spoke quietly to the judge, who frowned and gestured to Ada Parker. A ripple of unease spread through the courtroom. Maya stood. What's happening? The bailiff spoke again, louder this time, and I caught the words that made my blood run cold. He's gone. When court resumed the next morning, Sterling's chair sat empty. Judge Coleman frowned, glancing at the defense table. Where is the defendant? David Brennan stood, his expression tight. Your Honor, my client is currently in the hospital. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Ada Parker stood. "Your Honor, Dr. Whitmore is being treated for acute mercury poisoning." The judge's eyebrows shot up. "Mercury poisoning." "Yes, Your Honor," Ada Parker said. "Last night, while in custody, Dr. Whitmore ingested a mercury compound he had concealed on his person. He claimed it was an attempt on his life by a third party, trying to sabotage the trial." I felt my stomach drop. However, Ada Parker continued, "Surveillance footage from the jail shows Dr. Whitmore deliberately swallowing the substance himself. This was a calculated attempt to manufacture doubt and obstruct justice. We are adding charges of obstruction of justice and evidence tampering." Judge Coleman's face hardened. "Proceed with the trial. The defendant can be transported here once he's medically cleared." The prosecution called Rebecca Caldwell to the stand. She walked slowly to the witness box, her face pale and drawn. She had lost weight since I'd last seen her. Her hands trembled as she placed them on the Bible. Ada Parker approached gently. "Miss Caldwell, can you tell the jury how you came to work for Dr. Whitmore?" Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. "He found me 3 years ago. He said he was my father. He showed me documents, birth certificates, photos, letters from my mother. He told me that Elaine Whitmore had destroyed our family, that she'd stolen him away and left us in poverty." "And you believed him?" "Yes," Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face. "I wanted a father so badly. I'd spent my whole life feeling abandoned. And here he was saying he'd been looking for me, that he wanted to make things right." "What did he ask you to do?" Rebecca closed her eyes. "He showed me medical records. PET scans, blood tests, diagnostic reports. He said Elaine had advanced Alzheimer's, that she was suffering, that she didn't have much time left. He said we could ease her passing, make it painless. He told me the pills were palliative care, but they weren't." "No," Rebecca sobbed. "They were poison, and I gave them to her every single day for 2 years. I thought I was helping my father, but I was just his puppet." Ada Parker let the silence hang. "No further questions," she said quietly. The prosecution called Maya Hartwell. My daughter walked to the stand with her head high, her voice steady as she was sworn in. "Ms. Hartwell." Parker began. "You are a forensic psychologist with the FBI, correct?" "Yes." "Can you explain to the jury what coercive control is?" Maya turned to face the jury. "Coercive control is a pattern of behavior designed to dominate and isolate another person. It includes manipulation, intimidation, and the deliberate erosion of the victim's sense of reality. What Dr. Whitmore did to my mother was textbook coercive control combined with chemical manipulation. He didn't just poison her body, he poisoned her perception of reality. That's called gaslighting. And in your professional opinion, was Mrs. Whitmore capable of understanding what was happening to her?" "No," Maya said firmly. "The heavy metals doctor." "Whitmore administered cause neurological damage that mimics dementia. My mother's confusion was not a pre-existing condition, it was inflicted on her deliberately over years." Ada Parker nodded. "Ms. Hartwell, you also have a personal connection to this case. Can you explain?" Maya pulled out a document. "My name is Maya Hartwell. I am Elaine Whitmore's legally adopted daughter. I was adopted in 1995 when I was 8 years old. My mother kept me hidden from Dr. Whitmore for 30 years because he refused to allow her to have children." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. "He told her he was infertile." Maya continued, her voice hard. "He told her they would never have children. And when she adopted me anyway, he threatened to leave her if she brought me home. So she protected me the only way she could by keeping me a secret." She looked directly at Sterling's empty chair. "For 30 years, my mother loved me from a distance. She paid for my education, visited me every month, and kept me safe from a man who would have destroyed me. And when he started poisoning her, he made sure I couldn't reach her. He isolated her completely, but he failed. Because I found her, and I'm here to make sure he pays for what he did." The courtroom was silent. Finally, Ada Parker called me to the stand. I walked slowly to the witness box, my heart pounding. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Mrs. Whitmore. ADA Parker said gently, "Can you tell the jury in your own words what your husband did to you?" I took a deep breath. For 40 years, I began my voice steady. I built a life with Sterling Whitmore. I trusted him with everything, my health, my finances, my future. And he repaid me by trying to erase my mind and steal my legacy. He could have asked for a divorce. He could have left. He could have been honest. But he chose cruelty. He chose to make me believe I was losing my mind. He chose to isolate me from everyone I loved, and he almost succeeded. I looked toward the side door where I knew Sterling would eventually be brought in. "But he didn't break me," I said. "I survived." And now he will spend the rest of his life knowing that he failed. The door opened. Sterling was wheeled in on a gurney flanked by 2 guards and a nurse. He looked pale and weak, an IV in his arm. Judge Coleman gestured. "The defendant may remain on the gurney for the remainder of the proceedings." Sterling's eyes found mine across the courtroom. For a long moment, we stared at each other. Then he closed his eyes and turned his face away. He knew he had lost. I stepped down from the witness stand. As I passed the gurney, Sterling's voice, weak and broken, called out, "Elaine!" I didn't turn around. Maya squeezed my hand as I sat down beside her. "It's almost over, Mom," she whispered. But I knew it wasn't over. Not until I heard one word: guilty. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. When they returned, I gripped Maya's hand and waited for the words that would define the rest of Sterling's life. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back wall, cameras ready. Margaret sat behind me, her hand on my shoulder. Rebecca sat in the gallery, her face pale and resigned. Judge Coleman looked at the jury foreman, a middle-aged man in a gray sweater. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of attempted murder, how do you find the defendant?" The foreman looked directly at Sterling, who sat motionless in his wheelchair, an oxygen tube beneath his nose. "Guilty." A ripple of sound moved through the courtroom. I felt Maya's hand tighten on mine. "On the charge of elder abuse." "Guilty." "Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult." "Guilty." "Fraud and forgery." "Guilty." "Criminal conspiracy." "Guilty." "Obstruction of justice." "Guilty." The foreman's voice was steady, unflinching. 6 charges. 6 guilty verdicts. Sterling's head dropped forward. His attorney, David Brennan, closed his briefcase with a quiet click. Judge Coleman banged her gavel. "The defendant will remain in custody pending sentencing. We will reconvene in 1 week." 1 week later, I sat in the same courtroom for the final time. Judge Coleman looked down at Sterling from the bench, her expression stern and unyielding. "Dr. Sterling Whitmore," she began, "you have been found guilty on all counts. This court has reviewed the evidence, heard the testimony, and witnessed the catastrophic harm you inflicted on your wife, a woman who trusted you, loved you, and built a life with you for 40 years. She paused, letting the words settle. "You used your medical knowledge not to heal, but to destroy. You manipulated, isolated, and poisoned the woman who should have been able to trust you above all others. You enlisted accomplices, falsified records, and attempted to steal her entire estate. And when you were caught, you tried to obstruct justice by poisoning yourself to create doubt." Sterling sat in his wheelchair, his face expressionless. "This court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole," Judge Coleman said. "Your medical license is permanently revoked. You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $8 million to Mrs. Elaine Whitmore and Maya Hartwell, the full value of the assets you attempted to steal." She looked at him for a long moment. "You will spend the rest of your life in prison, Dr. Whitmore, and you will do so knowing that you failed. The woman you tried to erase is free. The daughter you never knew existed is thriving, and the legacy you tried to steal has been returned to its rightful owner." She banged her gavel. "Court is adjourned." Sterling was wheeled toward the side door, flanked by 2 marshals. As he passed my seat, he turned his head and looked at me one last time. I met his gaze. There was no anger in me, no hatred, no fear, only freedom. He looked away first, and then he was gone. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Mrs. Whitmore, how do you feel about the verdict? Mrs. Whitmore, what message do you have for other victims of elder abuse? Maya stood beside me, her arm around my shoulders. Margaret stood on my other side. I stepped up to the microphone, the winter air cold against my face. Justice may be slow, I said, my voice steady, but it is certain. To anyone out there who is being hurt, controlled, or manipulated by someone they trust, please know that you are not alone. Speak up. Reach out. There are people who will believe you and fight for you. I paused, looking at the cameras. I survived because of the people who refused to look away. My neighbor Margaret, who saw the truth when no one else did. My daughter Maya, who never stopped searching for me. Dr. Ryan Matthews, who trusted his instincts. And Detective Sarah Mitchell, who built a case that could not be ignored. I took a breath. Sterling Whitmore tried to erase me, but I am still here, and I will spend the rest of my life free. The reporters erupted with questions, but Maya gently guided me away. We walked down the courthouse steps together into the December sunlight. Later that week, the other sentences were handed down. Richard Thornton, the attorney who had helped Sterling falsify documents and steal my assets, was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. His law license was revoked, and he was ordered to pay $500,000 in restitution. Rebecca Caldwell was sentenced to 7 years, reduced to 5, due to her cooperation and testimony. She would be eligible for parole in 3 years. Before she was led away, she turned to me in the courtroom. "I'm sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry." I nodded. I didn't forgive her, not yet. Maybe not ever. But I understood her. She had been a victim, too. The legal battles over my estate took another 2 months to resolve, but in the end, everything was returned to me. The 15 properties Sterling had transferred to the Whitmore Foundation were reclaimed. The $8 million was recovered from offshore accounts. The fake will was voided, and my real will, the one I had written 20 years ago, was recognized as valid. 40% of my estate would go to Maya, 60% to charity. Sterling's name was erased from everything. Maya stayed in Seattle for the holidays. We spent Christmas together in Margaret's house, the three of us cooking and laughing and decorating a tree. On New Year's Eve, Maya and I stood on Margaret's porch, watching fireworks light up the Seattle skyline. "What are you going to do now, Mom?" Maya asked. I thought about that for a long moment. "I'm going to live," I said. "Really live. For the first time in 40 years, I'm free to be myself, to make my own choices, to build a life that's truly mine." Maya smiled and hugged me. "I'm so proud of you." "I'm proud of you too," I whispered. "You saved my life." "We saved each other," she said. 1 year later, I stood in the lobby of a new community center in Seattle's Queen Anne neighborhood, the Elaine Whitmore Center for Elder Justice. The building was bright and welcoming with large windows and comfortable chairs. On the wall hung a plaque, dedicated to survivors of elder abuse. "You are not alone. You are believed. You are strong." Maya stood beside me, cutting the ribbon. Margaret was there, beaming. Detective Sarah Mitchell attended along with Dr. Ryan Matthews and dozens of others who had supported me through the darkest time of my life. This center will provide free legal assistance counseling and advocacy for elderly victims of abuse, I said to the small crowd. No one should have to fight alone. As the applause filled the room, I looked around at the faces survivors, advocates, friends. Sterling had tried to erase me. Instead, I had built something that would outlast us both. I had taken my pain and turned it into purpose, and I was finally truly free. 1 year later, I stood in the garden I had planted with my own hands, watching Maya tie up tomato plants under the autumn sun. The fog that had once clouded my mind was gone. In its place was clarity, purpose, and hope. The estate looked different now. I had repainted the walls in warm yellows and soft blues. I had replaced the heavy curtains with sheer ones that let the light pour in. I had filled the rooms with plants and photographs, pictures of Maya as a child of Margaret and me, laughing of the life I was building now. This house, which had almost been my tomb, was now my sanctuary. "Mom," Maya called from the garden, "these tomatoes are huge. What did you feed them?" I smiled, walking down the porch steps. "Love and sunlight. That's all anything really needs." Maya laughed and brushed dirt from her hands. She had moved back to Seattle 6 months ago, accepting a position as senior forensic psychologist with the FBI's Seattle field office. She lived with me now in the guest wing she had never been allowed to occupy as a child. Every morning we had coffee together on the porch. Every evening we cooked dinner side by side. We talked about everything: her cases, my foundation work, the future we were building together. For the first time in 40 years, I wasn't alone. The Elaine Whitmore Foundation for Elder Justice had officially launched in the spring. With the recovered $8 million and the proceeds from selling several properties I no longer needed, I had created an endowment to fund legal advocacy, medical support, and housing assistance for elderly victims of abuse. The foundation operated out of a bright, accessible office in downtown Seattle. We employed a team of attorneys, social workers, and victim advocates. In our first 6 months, we had helped 43 survivors escape abusive situations, recover stolen assets, and rebuild their lives. Margaret served on the board of directors. Dr. Ryan Matthews volunteered his time as a medical consultant. Detective Sarah Mitchell helped train our staff on recognizing signs of abuse and building strong legal cases. And Maya, my brilliant, compassionate daughter, served as the Foundation's Director of Psychological Services. We had taken our pain and built something that would outlast us both. One afternoon in late October, I received a letter. It came from the Washington Corrections Center for Women, where Rebecca Caldwell was serving her sentence. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Inside was a handwritten note on lined paper. "Dear Mrs. Whitmore, I know I have no right to write to you. I know that nothing I say can undo the harm I caused, but I wanted you to know that I think about you every day. I have spent the past year in therapy working to understand how I allowed myself to be manipulated. I have faced the truth about what I did and why I did it. I was desperate to belong to someone, and Sterling Whitmore exploited that desperation. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I am grateful you survived. I am grateful that you stopped me before it was too late. I have enrolled in a college program here. I am studying social work. When I am released, I want to help people like me, people who have been manipulated into doing terrible things. I want to spend the rest of my life trying to make amends. You showed me mercy by testifying on my behalf at sentencing. I will never forget that." With deep remorse, Rebecca, I folded the letter carefully and set it on my desk. Did I forgive her? I didn't know yet, but I understood her, and I truly hoped that she would find redemption. I had not heard from Sterling. According to Detective Mitchell, he was in poor health. The mercury he had ingested during the trial had caused permanent kidney damage. He required dialysis 3 times a week. He spent most of his days in the prison infirmary, frail and diminishing. No one visited him. Not his colleagues, not his former friends, not even his attorney. He had spent 40 years building a reputation, and it had crumbled in a matter of weeks. I did not take pleasure in his suffering, but I did not mourn it either. I had let him go. He no longer occupied space in my mind or my heart. He was simply a man I used to know, a man who had made terrible choices and was now paying the price. I had survived him, and that was enough. On a cool evening in October, Maya and I sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the sun set over Elliott Bay. The sky was painted in shades of gold and pink, the water shimmering like glass. Do you ever think about what would have happened if Margaret hadn't called 911 that day? Maya asked quietly. I considered the question. I try not to, but yes, sometimes. You'd be gone, Maya said, her voice thick. And I would have spent the rest of my life wondering why you stopped answering my calls. I reached over and took her hand. But that's not what happened. I'm here, you're here, and we have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time. Maya squeezed my hand. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart." We sat in comfortable silence watching the light fade. I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, confused, frightened, trapped in a fog of poison and lies. I thought about the moment I realized Sterling was trying to kill me. I thought about the cameras Margaret had installed, the blood test that revealed the truth, the video footage that sealed Sterling's fate. I thought about the trial, the verdicts, the moment I walked out of that courtroom a free woman. And I thought about the life I was building now, a life filled with purpose, connection, and love. They had tried to take everything from me, my mind, my money, my dignity. But they couldn't take the most important thing, my capacity to love and be loved. Maya leaned her head on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" I smiled. "I'm thinking that I'm 66 years old and my life is just beginning." "Good," Maya said, "because I have plans for us. There's a new exhibit at the aquarium, jellyfish from all over the world. I thought we could go this weekend." I laughed, a real full laugh that came from deep in my chest. "I would love that," I said. And as the last light faded from the sky, I realized something. I was no longer looking back at the pain of the past. I was looking forward toward a future bright with possibility. I was free, truly, completely free. And I would spend the rest of my days living, fully loving, deeply, and helping others find their way out of the darkness. Because that's what survivors do. We rise, we rebuild, and we shine. And to you listening to this story, remember this: God gave me a second chance when I should have had none. When I was lost in that fog of poison and lies, when I couldn't even remember my own daughter's name, He sent Margaret to my door. He sent Dr. Matthews to question what others accepted. He sent Maya back to me when I needed her most. I am living proof that even in our darkest moments, we are never truly alone. Looking back at my own journey through this family drama story, I want to tell you, don't be like me. Don't ignore the red flags. Don't let fear of confrontation keep you silent. Don't stay in a situation where someone is slowly erasing who you are, whether through poison, manipulation, or control. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. This family revenge story taught me that justice isn't about vengeance. It's about truth. Sterling didn't fall because I hated him. He fell because the truth came to light. And that's what I want you to remember. The truth always surfaces eventually. If you're living through your own family drama story, please know you are not crazy. You are not alone. And you deserve to be free. To those who see themselves in this family revenge story, whether as the survivor, the witness, or even the one who's made terrible mistakes, it's never too late to choose differently. Redemption is possible. Healing is possible. Freedom is possible. This is the end of my family drama story, but it's also a beginning. Every ending is a new start. If this story moved you, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Have you or someone you know experienced elder abuse or family betrayal? Your story matters. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next family revenge stories, because every voice deserves to be heard. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Your time and attention mean everything. Please note, the stories shared on this channel contain fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If you find the content distressing or unsuitable, feel free to exit and explore other content that better suits your preferences. Your well-being comes first.